Ebia meka ujili, but mpeseme nkana untini ye pase. Sammy gyamfi any the gold board, no. According to sources, Omama my Ghana actually 22 billion US dollars. Mankese million no, me say dollars. Me say $billion. Na emunchire mu no eba. Kojo Opon Nkrumah you part of the finance committee I parliament. And then echo channel 1 TV station. And we are connected to City FM so. Na ehona Kojo Opon Nkrumah den chire mu ba se. Every be a trim or your press conference country Bank of Ghana governor said Omunya is omode oman Ghana sike to gold na kwanye omo fa so te do to gold no ebe ma oman na boka according to Kojo Opon Nkrumah and this form fa na anye hwe ya mfa na nka anye den anye hwe but after 1 year the IMF itself ababonten ababeka asem krona Kojo Opon Nkrumah kaye say ene de due ya mene wo kasai afi a ye frɛ 2025 emma na wie no na Ghana man ya hwede sika 22 billion US dollars ni nyina ne sɛ Ghana ban ese okoto gold akoton ne amanone na ode atie cedis no ene dollar rate no abafom ene na akofa ka chinchirenche wei abeto Ghana for ye kom na yenko tie enkyerɛkyerɛ mu a Kojo Opon Nkrumah de baaye ewia yasan atoaso makraw
who are taking issue with the BOG's approach for some time now in relation specifically to this particular program. Ofuasi Ayerbe, Member of Parliament, is a ranking member on the Economic Committee of Parliament. Honorable Kojo Opon Nkrumah, you're welcome to Eyewitness News.
Sandra, good evening to your listeners. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you here. I'm looking at the headline and it would look to me as though, well, we've made a loss, but we've also made a gain. So, would it be fair to give it that explanation and say nothing has been lost because something has been gained?
It will be unfortunate, very unfortunate to trivialize major matters of this nature. If anybody were to say that, remember that from April 2025, the minority led by myself started raising the red flags that the significant expansion of the domestic gold purchase program was creating an illusion in the Ghanaian economy. Let me take you back, and if your producers at some point can find back those debates, we mentioned that while the government wanted to create the impression that the Ghanaian economy had been stabilized or had been transformed, actually nothing has changed. The only thing that they were doing was that they were significantly scaling up the domestic gold purchase program and pumping the proceeds onto the market to create an illusion that the economy had been transformed, and as a result of the transformation, the currency was now stable. Now, we said that out of goodwill and out of patriotism, because as history will recall it, we were the midwives of the domestic gold purchase program. Dr. Mahmoud Baumia, as at August, September 2024, is the one who led it. And quite recently, when the central bank governor came to parliament, he confirmed it. And by being the ones who conceptualized and birthed it, we know the downsides of the program. And we know that a significant expansion of the program has the potential to really hurt our economy in terms of a depletion of, reserves, depending on which way you go about it. Additionally, because of the question about the source of the gold, if you are buying a lot of Dory gold, you are invariably going to be promoting a lot of galamsey, which would affect your water bodies. It will also come to hurt your central bank balance sheet in the end. There will be a loss of focus on the actual transformation of the economy, and it will also eventually have an impact on focusing on the sectors that create jobs and sustainable growth. So we said all of this. As you will recall, the government denied this ad infinitum. By the end of the year, we then found out that about $10 billion of intervention, and they are still denying its intervention. They have a new sexy name for it. They call it intermediation. Had taken place between January and June this year, a lot more intervention has taken place, and all the consequences we warned about, unfortunately, are coming out. Now, here's the important part. In about October last year, we requested Parliament to investigate what was going on, because we know the challenges that the significant expansion, and it's so sad that the IMF now uses the same expression, significant expansion. We know the challenges that this portends for the Ghanaian economy. And so we wanted Parliament to do an inquiry. I filed a motion, asked for an inquiry, so that we could all help in outlining the ways to do this without incurring all of these losses to water bodies, losses to the Bank of Ghana, taxes that will come at the end of the day to pay back for all of these losses. Unfortunately, you will recall again, and your viewers and listeners will recall, the majority side threw out this application. At the time, the loss was only $214 million. Now, at the end of the year, when the Bank of Ghana gave its report out, which report has still, and I insist, it has still not been brought to Parliament, the Bank of Ghana reported that they had made a loss of $960 million. Now, we are finding out that from the IMF's disclosures that were made by the central government, we are finding out that it's about $1.7 billion loss. It will be important to have an opportunity to reconcile what the Bank of Ghana claims is the loss 960, which has still not been brought to Parliament, and this 1.7 that the sixth review of the IMF is talking about. But that's just one question. The other question that we will need to get into eventually is, the 1.7 is only the loss. What was the gross monetary financing that the Bank of Ghana availed to the gold board to be used for this? Because that's monetary financing. That's printing of money to finance government activities. What was the gross amount? Again, in the IMF document, you'll find that they have hinted that there was monetary financing. The full figure has not been provided. So what was the total amount? That is something that we will need to get into at the end of the day. Is there any relationship between that and the high levels of sterilization that they are having to do, the 93 billion cedi sterilization they are having to do to mop up the excess liquidity that they would have injected through this, program? So tonight, I'm very sad. Let me be very honest with you. I am very sad tonight that all of these things that we forewarned are happening, and there's still an attempt to cover up and not let the facts be known. I think in the coming days, the minority and the NPP, as we dig through the numbers some more, will update the nation on what we are finding. But it breaks my heart that the government just refused to listen, just made this thing partisan. And now the losses that have been incurred, they are only deferred taxes. Those losses are deferred taxes. You and I will have to pay for it at the end of the day. That is what saddens my heart this evening.
It's interesting you use the word cover up, or the phrase cover up, because so the 900 that was earlier disclosed, the 900 million plus that was earlier disclosed, versus what the IMF is now revealing. Is it the case that the government gave a fresh set of figures to the IMF and gave a different set of figures to the general public or the Ghanaian citizens through the parliamentarians? Is that the understanding we should be getting?
We keep running numbers. We keep looking at the summary of economic and financial data, and we think that the government is understating it. This is why we asked for the inquiry in the beginning, which inquiry they threw out. Now, at the end of the year, the Bank of Ghana says that they incurred 9.6 billion cedis. Even if you use the 10 rate at the time, that was about $960 million loss. However, they have disclosed to the IMF that they made $1.7 billion loss. You know, the IMF doesn't generate its own figures. They rely on what they call the authorities' figures, the presumption of regularity. So why does the Bank of Ghana report say $960 million and the IMF report is now saying 1.7 billion? There's only one way you can find out. When you have an inquiry during which people have been put on oath at the risk of perjury, and they have to answer those questions and provide all of the documentation that backs the answers that they are given. It really saddens my heart that we are in this fix, because this amount of money, and please bear in mind something, let's even use the $960 million. The other day I was saying in Parliament that the government has elected to lose 960 million. That's what they were disclosing through the Bank of Ghana reports, only to turn around to go for a loan of 1 billion from the World Bank. What sort of economics will say, I choose to throw away 960 million, and then in return, I'll go for a loan of 1 billion? Now the IMF is telling you that that figure is not 960 million, it is $1.7 billion. So to now refresh my question, what sort of economics makes you want to throw away $1.7 billion and turn around to go to the World Bank for a loan of about $1 billion?
Okay. I have one more question for you, Honorable. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I have one more question for you, but if you could just indulge me, I want to hear from your colleague on the other line and return to you and possibly have you respond to that. Honorable Atta Issa is a member of parliament for Sanarigu. He's a member of the finance committee, a member of the NDC. Honorable Issa, you're welcome to Eyewitness News. The story we are looking at tonight is the IMF revelation that we made 1.7 billion dollar loss under the Good Purchase program, something that you have celebrated over the years. The declaration that you made previously was not up to this much. Does it mean that the government has been concealing information from us all this while until IMF came up with this information?
Okay, let me say good evening to you, to my senior colleague, and to the good people of Sanarigu. I think, first of all, as a government, I think we acknowledge the concern raised by the IMF regarding the loss incurred under the Good Purchase program. Now, I am not in the business of disputing properly audited losses. I am not in that, or an attempt to present a program cost as profit. I will never do that. Now, one thing I want listeners to understand is that the Bank of Ghana's 2025 audited financial statement recognized a net loss on the gold transaction of approximately 9.05 billion, if you remember. Now, the IMF is using a wider program cost methodology. So, an estimate of the bank's related operational losses, according to the bank, reached approximately 1.5% of GDP. These figures should not be interpreted to be because they are different. Somebody is concealing numbers. It has to do with cost categorization or the accounting methodology. So the difference is not as a result of concealment of any data. It is primarily because of the program cost methodology that has been used by the IMF. Now, let me provide this report. So the IMF report makes 5 material findings, in my opinion. First, it says that the Bank of Ghana suffered a DGPP related, that's the Domestic Good Purchase Program, related losses equivalent to about 1.5 billion. Secondly, it described the goal for reserve and the goal for oil operations as crucial fiscal activities that aggravated the bank already negative equity position. If you remember, when we first brought out the issue of the negative equity of the bank, we reported that the Bank of Ghana was already in an equity position of negative 61 billion. And this, we added 32 billion for 2025, taking it to about 96 billion. So what we were trying to say is that Bank of Ghana shouldn't have ventured into the gold purchase program. It should have been left under the presence of the gold board. So this makes it a crucial fiscal expenditure. Now, and the fourth point they also state is that the IMF says the 5 billion receivable created under the government of Ghana BOG cost sharing arrangement caused a temporary breach of the program ceiling of the bank. Ghana claims on the central bank. The actual breach was assessed at approximately 3 billion. That is 0.2% of GDP. What it simply means is that the IMF receivable concept, it is not final concept because they themselves are approximating. That's the first thing. Now, the position should therefore not be reduced to just headline, Ghana lost money by buying gold, or something like, oh, the domestic gold purchase program has landed the country into more debt. We were very clear. There was cost attached to stabilization. We were very clear from day one that we needed to spend this money to restore macroeconomic stability, which is enshrined in the Bank of Ghana's Act. The Bank of Ghana has 2 primary mandates. One is to ensure price stability, and 2 is to ensure macroeconomic growth and development. Government of Ghana, through the Gold Purchase Program, delivered those 2 mandates. But
that looks like a fluke, is it not? So it's like a cosmetic or artificial victory that you have chalked.
It is not. It is reflecting in improved purchasing power of consumers. If your inflation at a point was about 54% or 23.8%, now you are having about 5%. That is a savings in your nominal income. But I'm saying that let's define the term very well and just oppose it to the IMF data. The term loss should not be misunderstood by the public. It does not necessarily mean amount of gold that has not been accounted for. The losses from my perspective arises from transactional and accounting factors. For example, premiums paid to purchase goods from aggregators and intermediaries. We were very clear that the exchange rate that you offer to attract people not smuggling gold outside, you have to pay them a different rate as opposed to the Bank of Ghana approved rate. So the difference between what is offered to the aggregators and that of the Bank of Ghana creates an exchange differential, and that becomes an artificial loss. It is not a cash loss, it's an accounting loss. We have been very consistent. So the cost methodology for World Bank and the IMF and that of Bank of Ghana is different because we do not recognize exchange differential as loss. So we
deliberately inflicted this loss on ourselves so that we'll save smuggling.
That is why I'm saying that you need, for example, Sanda, you do trade in Ghana. Now, what Bank of Ghana issues as the daily BOG rate, do you get the same rate when you go to the bank or when you go to the forex market? You always get higher rate than that of the Bank of Ghana. That creates an incentive to achieve a particular end. So if the gold board haven't realized that if you offer the Bank of Ghana's rate, people will find other alternative ways of selling the gold without passing through the gold board. And we created that institution as Parliament of Ghana to be the number one sole aggregator of gold and exporter of gold. So we needed to attract those small-scale miners and other mining companies to sell to government at a discounted rate. So when you do that, it creates an exchange differential. Okay. And that exchange differential is an accounting loss and not an economic or technical loss.
Okay. Let me hear
the second issue.
Okay, go ahead. I want to put it to your colleague and then we'll end the conversation.
No, maybe the second issue too is that we must also understand that the asset and the purity difference between estimated and financial refined gold content. Look, what is reported in Ghana and what is reported at the point of sale is mostly different. So that difference does not represent technical loss. So these are simple accounting treatments and then the exchange rate movements and all those things. That's why I'm saying that from day one, I read the press conference on behalf of the majority and we were very clear that there is cost to fiscal stabilization. There is also cost to economic growth and development, but that cost is not as a result of a technical cost, but an accounting treatment. And we disagree with the IMF when they stated in last year that Bank of Ghana had made loss of 214 million. I was having the point, I think I debated it with Honorable Kojo Nkrumah, and I was very clear at that time that we should distinguish between accounting loss and a commercial loss. Cash transactions represent technical or commercial losses. Non-cash items represent accounting losses, and it doesn't show prudence, it doesn't show viability, it doesn't show going concern of any organization.
Okay. Honorable Kojo Nkrumah, your colleague says this has to simply do with the exchange rate differential. It does not necessarily mean a loss in the sense of profit and loss, or you've gone to do business and you have made a loss as an organization. Does that sit well with you?
Sanda, before I answer your question, he has made 5 startling revelations in his submissions that I think your producers, yourself, everybody needs to take note of. Ataisa has just admitted on live radio that the Bank of Ghana in 2025 was involved in quasi-fiscal expenditures. That means that they were printing money to support the government to do some activity that government should have been using the fiscal program to do. The question that needs to be answered is how much money.
Okay, I hear that he wants to react to that. I want to be sure whether you have quoted.
I never said.
I mean, I kept
I never said
admissions he has made.
Okay, you proceed.
Yes.
He has just admitted that they participated in quasi-fiscal activities. And I'm saying that it is a matter of record now. It will need to be established. Number two, he has just also admitted, and I've been recording this interview as we're having it, that that's the NDC, these are his words, added 32 billion to the loss of the Bank of Ghana. By the way, we say it's 34. He says it's 32. You remember that they kept literally telling the people of Ghana on Untruth that it was only 15 billion, and we kept saying that it was 34. This evening, he has shot himself in the foot by admitting that his words, the NDC, added 32 billion to the losses of the Bank of Ghana. Number three, he has just also admitted to you that he read the press conference on behalf of the majority. The fact is now being established that the Bank of Ghana accounts for 2025 have still not been presented to Parliament. It was Ataisa, some NDC members of Parliament, some NDC communicators who came to Parliament to announce it. Parliament has still not been seized with it. Number four, tonight he says that the NDC disagrees with the IMF. Since when did they start disagreeing with the IMF? They have been going around claiming that the IMF has validated their work that they have done. Now, when the same IMF says that you have been involved in quasi-fiscal expenses and you have lost 1.7 billion, they say they disagree. And now I come to your question. He says that it is only a matter of different exchange rates. In fact, that in itself is an admission that this government has been misleading the IMF. And let me explain to you why. There's something called multiple currency practices, which is not allowed under an IMF program. You cannot give one exchange rate for one transaction and another exchange rate for another transaction. So especially when you are in an IMF program, multiple currency practices is not allowed. I have had occasion to question government officials on oath in Parliament who have denied that they were using multiple currency practices. Tonight on your radio, at 5:22, he has admitted that they were using what he calls different exchange rates. That is multiple currency practices. 5 admissions which are colossal.
All right.
Just in your interview. But I'll end with the answer.
Yes.
If he claims that it is methodology or exchange rate differential, with the greatest of respect, and Atta is my friend, I like him very much. But for a government that has told so many untruths on this matter, their words don't mean much. The persons responsible for this will have to appear properly on oath at the instance of documents subpoenaed so that we can get to the bottom of this. Covering it up and letting somebody come and do a press conference or to put out a narrative that is only methodology, is only different exchange rates, with the greatest of respect, is not how you run monetary policy. That's not what you do.
Very well. I have one last question for you, and that's from the last but one paragraph in our story. I'm going to read it verbatim. It says, the IMF added that the DGPP had been, quote and unquote, operationally central to the 8-fold increase in Ghana's gross international reserves since the start of the Extended Credit Facility Supported Program, with reserves reaching $11.9 billion by the end of 2025, equivalent to about 4 months of import cover and significantly exceeding program targets. That's the end of the story. Now, what this gives me, the impression this gives me is that things are looking good. And if there were possible signs of trouble, IMF would have started issuing warnings through their publication. They have not given any warning that we are running into a ditch. What they have said here looks like a positive one for me. So once again, back to my first question, why should I find this loss offensive reading this statement from the IMF?
There are 2 answers I'll give you. Number one, what you just read simply means that the government abandoned all other avenues for building reserves and focused on the DGPP. The question is, what are the other avenues for building reserves that have been abandoned? And will those other avenues have incurred all of these cost and opportunity costs that I've spoken to you about? That is a question.
Okay.
That's the first answer. The second answer to your question is that yes, reserves have been built through the DGPP, but at what cost, and who will now come and pay for it? As I've mentioned to you, in April 2025, when I started raising these alarms that a significant expansion of the DGPP, like how this government wants to do it, will portend problems, we listed about 5 problems. We said it was going to come at an opportunity cost to our reserve accumulation program. It was going to affect the environment because if they are using Dory gold, it's going to lead to purchase of Galamsey gold and your water bodies will suffer. Look at how all the promises were made about dealing with Galamsey and now literally the turbidity levels tell you it's worse. We also said it's going to lead to significant losses at the central bank. Tonight, they admit that they have added 32 billion Ghana cedis loss to the losses of the central bank. It is happening. They lost 34 and paid back only 5. Even that one they paid by borrowing money. And they are going to push the rest on you and I as a tax to pay at the end of the day.
Okay.
We also said that it was going to come at a loss of other economic transformation programs. Now, literally all of those programs have been abandoned and all that this government is doing is buying gold and selling it and pumping the dollars onto the market. We also warned you that it was going to lead to higher unemployment because the alternative economic programs that we should be embarking upon that create jobs, they will abandon it. And now the National Development Planning Commission is confirming that 2025, you are seeing jobless growth. It breaks my heart that this government is more interested in winning what appears to be a political debate and the optics than even just listening to us. Even if we made mistakes, I beg you, listen to us and let us save Ghana the cost of these optics that you are doing.
Thank you so much for speaking to us. Honorable Kojo Nkrumah is a former Minister of State. He's MPP Member of Parliament, I beg your pardon, for the Ofuasi Ayerbe constituency in the Eastern Region. He's a ranking member on the Economic Committee. Ataisa is still with me.
Yes.
I want you to respond to what he has said, the 5 confessions you made tonight. That's 1. 2, he said that what is happening is a carry forward of taxes on the ordinary Ghanaian.
All right. So let me begin by saying that I have maintained and always, anytime I appear on the program with Honorable Kojo Nkrumah, I try to make the same correction, but it keeps on repeating. Number 1, I never admitted that the Bank of Ghana engaged in expenditure, quasi-fiscal expenditure. He doesn't understand, sorry for that, but I don't think he appreciates a quasi-fiscal function. When somebody says an organization engages in a quasi-fiscal expenditure, it simply means that it is not within its trading mandate or its core mandate. So, for example, when the Gold Board was created, the government allocated $279 million for the gold purchase program in 2025. When we started gold purchases domestically, we realized that the Bank of Ghana needed to intervene. In such intermediation, it is a quasi-fiscal function because it is not part of its original mandate. And we were very clear when we started the gold purchase program. The second thing too is that Honorable Kojo Nkrumah maintained that I said the NDC government made a total loss of 32 billion. I never said. What I said was that the equity position was increased under us by 32 billion. Equity is different from a loss. And I tried indicating this thing every time. You don't add a cash loss to a non-cash loss to get a loss. What you do when you declare an operating loss for a year or an operating profit of the year, you will have to now account for exchange differentials as enshrined in the Bank of Ghana's law. You need to also account for special drawings rights, which are not cash. Then you add it to your operating profit for the year, and that gives you your shareholding fund, which in this case, in Bank of Ghana, it is called the equity position. So if I say the Bank of Ghana had added 32 billion equity, negative equity, it doesn't mean the Bank of Ghana made a loss of 32 billion. I think that indication needs to be made. Now, the third issue that I said also was that the differences between what was reported in the Bank of Ghana's 2025 audited statement of 9 billion Ghana cedis and what is being reported by the government of the IMF is because of the cost methodology. And I gave you the differences that can arise as a result of the cost elements. When you are looking at it from the exchange differential perspective, you will naturally see that the Bank of Ghana will rely on the forex market that was used to offer to the affiliates and to offer to the aggregators. But when you look at the Bank of the IMF reporting, they will indicate what they actually saw on the website or the official documentation of the Bank of Ghana. That creates an exchange differential, and that can only account for cost differences. Now, I am happy particularly though government, Ministry of Finance had all agreed that the 2025 was a year we were now starting the Gold Purchase program. This year, we have taken several corrective measures to deal with the fiscal exposures to Bank of Ghana. And he said that the taxpayers will be asked to pay. Look, in 2026, the Ministry of Finance allocated 5 billion Ghana cedis for Bank of Ghana recapitalization. Yet we did not increase one tax. In fact, we rather saw some level of cushioning to the Ghanaian public. We didn't introduce any tax, despite approving 5 billion Ghana cedis for recapitalization at the Bank of Ghana. So it is not the case that the government of Ghana will do a pass-on cost through taxes for people to recapitalize the Bank of Ghana. The corrective measures, I'll do it in a minute. One, government of Ghana has taken transfer of commercial gold operation to Gold Board fully. Since April 2026 this year, purchases of artisanal and small-scale Dory gold have been conducted by Gold Board rather than the Bank of Ghana. That is a corrective measure. And if you remember, when I did the press conference, I said that next year, which is 2026, you will not see a lot of exposures on the books of Bank of Ghana because several steps have been taken. In July 2026, the Bank of Ghana, the Ministry of Finance and Gold Board signed a memorandum of understanding formally transferring the Gold Purchase program activities to Gold Board and ending related quasi-fiscal expenditure of the central bank. This was completed as a prior action for the IMF review that they just approved recently. The government now bears fiscal cost transparently. Now, under the new agreement, the Ministry of Finance is to cover 100% of the approved program from July 1st, 2026, rather than allowing those expenses to accumulate on the books of balance, on the balance sheet of Bank of Ghana. And this is what we intend to do. This is to make sure that, first of all, there is appropriate parliamentary approvals and appropriations, there is regular fiscal reporting, public financial management controls, and audit scrutiny to ensure that no amount of gold is purchased directly from the Bank of Ghana. Right. The government has also negotiated a lot of reduction in fees and premiums and discounts payable to aggregators and exporters. Through the intermediate premiums, the Gold Board fees has been reduced. Assets and security losses has also been reduced. Foreign off-taker discounts have also been reduced. And unnecessary overseas refining and logistics expenses have also been reduced. Right. So if you look at this and you just oppose it to what the IMF has said, the IMF is only cautioning what we already know. The difference between our reported financial statement loss and that of the IMF has to do with the cost methodology. We have broadened the cost element under the IMF program, and we have used our narrow cost element as enshrined in the Bank of Ghana's law.
Thank you so much for speaking to us. That's Honorable Atta Issa. He's member